My name is Dorothy Halbrook, and on New Year's Eve, the one meant for renewal and love, I was called a parasite by my own daughter-in-law. A parasite, in front of everyone I cared about. You might actually regret skipping this part, because what happened that night changed everything. It started with silence, then veered sharply into cruelty. And in that cold moment, I remembered every slight I tolerated over the years. So before you sit down and listen, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth channel. Now let's listen to this story. New Year's Eve had always been sacred to me. For nearly 50 years, I hosted the family gathering in my home. My husband Henry and I made it a tradition. We served roast duck with apricot glaze rosemary rolls from scratch, and my signature sour cherry cobbler that took 2 days to prepare. It wasn't just dinner. It was a celebration of everything we built as a family. Our house smelled like cinnamon hope and stories waiting to be told. But after Henry passed away 2 years ago, things started to change. At first, Mark and his wife Whitney said they wanted to help by hosting. I didn't protest. My back was weaker than it used to be, and the idea of relaxing for once had some appeal. The first year felt okay. The second was different. This third year, it became clear I wasn't being helped. I was being phased out. I arrived at their home on the 31st, just before sunset, carrying my bottle of homemade sparkling cider, a family favorite. I wore my best maroon sweater and a string of pearls Henry gave me for our 25th anniversary. Their home was decorated beautifully as always. Whitney had an eye for perfection. Gold accents, floating candles, sleek table settings that probably took her hours. But something was off. The long dining table was full. Every chair already occupied save for a single folding chair awkwardly placed at the very end against the wall near the thermostat. That was my seat. I stood at the entrance cider still in hand and waited. Maybe someone would notice. Maybe they'd shift things around. Instead, I got a distracted hello from Mark as he passed me to grab another bottle of wine. Whitney didn't even look up from the table where she was adjusting the place cards. Only Liam, my sweet grandson, noticed. He ran over with a big hug, his small arms wrapping around my waist. My heart melted, but even that moment was brief. Whitney called him back sharply, saying he'd mess up his shirt. I made my way to the folding chair, placing the bottle of cider on the table beside me. No one commented. No one moved. It was as if I were furniture. The chatter continued. People discussed resolutions and flights to Italy. I waited for someone to offer me a drink. I waited for someone to even hand me a plate. Nothing. Whitney made a toast. Of course she did. She stood up, raising her glass of rosé, her gold bracelet catching the candlelight. This year is about clarity, she declared, letting go of what drains us and making space for what uplifts us. A few people nodded. Mark smiled too widely. And then Whitney looked straight at me. Because sometimes what drags us down isn't always obvious. Sometimes it's what we've allowed to stay too long. The words hit like a slap. Still, I said nothing. I smiled. I clinked my empty glass in the air, pretending it was full. I didn't flinch. Didn't make a scene. Because I was raised to believe that strength lives in restraint. But inside me, something began to shift. Not anger. Not quite yet. Just the slow, steady awakening of a woman who has had enough. After dinner, I helped clear the table. Of course I did. No one asked me to, but I wasn't raised to leave messes behind. I washed plates while Whitney took selfies in front of her centerpieces. When the last guest left, I grabbed my coat from the upstairs closet, the one no one offered to fetch for me. On my way down, I passed Whitney on the phone in the hallway. She didn't see me. She's still here, she said. I thought she'd get the hint. Mark replied, let's just talk about it next week. Whitney snorted. There's nothing to talk about. The house is ours. She's been living rent-free in the suite for too long. We need to reclaim our space. I paused mid-step. The suite, my home. I moved into the garden suite after Henry died, offering the main house to Mark and Whitney to raise Liam and I. We agreed I'd stay close, help with Liam, be a part of their lives. They were already making plans to erase me. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, listening to the wind rattle the frost-covered window. I thought about the decades I gave, the sacrifices, the small kindnesses no one remembered. But I also thought of something else, the original deed, And what Whitney clearly didn't realize about who still held legal weight? The insult wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was surgical, clean, sharp, and thrown with a practiced hand. Whitney had rehearsed that line. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't heat-of-the-moment anger. It was theater planned for effect. We were halfway through dinner when she stood clinking her glass like a woman giving a wedding toast. Her tone sparkled with fake warmth. "We learned so much this year," she said, "especially about boundaries, about recognizing what's toxic, and about reclaiming space from people who act entitled to what isn't theirs." She smiled at the table. Then she looked directly at me. Parasites don't always look like strangers. The room froze. Forks stopped moving. Napkins dangled mid-lap. Elaine shifted in her seat. Mark scratched his temple. No one said a word. Whitney kept talking casually now, like she hadn't just thrown a grenade. "Sometimes they live with you, eat with you, expect things, and never say thank you." I swallowed my breath. My cider bottle was still unopened beside my plate. No one had poured me a drink, not even water. I looked around. No eye contact. Elaine finally spoke up, her voice thin. "I think we're being a little intense tonight." Whitney shrugged, just sharing my truth. Liam had wandered off to play with his tablet. No one else moved. I didn't respond. I just kept my hands folded on my napkin and stared into the middle of the table. Not a single person came to my defense. Not even my son. I realized then they expected me to leave. Whitney had set the stage perfectly. If I cried, I'd look fragile. If I yelled, I'd be dramatic. If I left, they could say I made a scene. So I did none of that. I waited. I ate a bite of dry tart. I helped wash dishes again. Then I left, coat in hand. But I didn't go home and cry. I went to the bank the next morning. I pulled the original deed. The garden suite. Still legally mine. And there, buried in paragraph 7, was the clause no one had noticed or bothered to revise. I had lifetime residence rights. No eviction. No force. No sell-off without my consent. They could insult me, but they couldn't erase me. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not Elaine. Not my bridge club. Not even Pastor Ron, who'd once helped me navigate the paperwork when Henry passed. I just sat quietly at my kitchen table that next morning with the original deed unfolded in front of me, a cup of weak chamomile beside it, and let it wash over me. Lifetime residence. The words were simple, tucked inside a legal clause like just another sentence. But to me they were thunder. The garden suite may have been physically smaller than the main house, but emotionally, it had always been mine. The sun poured through its windows differently. Henry and I built that addition together when Mark was still in high school. We'd imagined using it for guests, or perhaps one day for ourselves. And when Henry passed, I moved in, willingly. I even paid for the renovations to modernize it. Plumbing insulation, a separate entrance with a charming blue gate. I wasn't a burden. I was the reason they could afford to live so well in that main house in the first place. And now they wanted me gone. Not directly. That was the clever part. Whitney had always played a long game. Little things. Liam's sleep routine is delicate. Could you try not to run the blender at 7 a.m.? Could we not cook with garlic this week? It lingers. Maybe we should keep our entrances separate. It's healthier for boundaries. I obliged. I gave space. I thought it was just adjustment. I didn't realize I was being erased. But now, armed with this document and a slow-burning clarity, I saw the strategy. Isolate, undermine, humiliate, then remove. That evening, I made tea, sat in the garden, and thought. I didn't want to win. That word never appealed to me. But I did want them to understand that kindness was not the same as weakness. And I wanted Whitney to see that calling me a parasite at her own dinner table was the last mistake she would ever make without consequences. The next day, I visited the county clerk's office. Not for drama, for confirmation. Lifetime residence clause is intact, the woman told me, adjusting her glasses. No revisions filed. No power of attorney changes. You're good. She gave me a nod. Not a smile, just a professional nod that said, you have ground to stand on. I walked out of that building taller than I'd felt in years. It was a funny thing how clarity sharpens your spine. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Instead, I cleaned. I dusted every corner of the garden suite. I refolded the linens. I updated my filing cabinet. I put the deed in a fireproof safe and placed a copy inside a second folder marked for Elaine, just in case anything ever happened to me. And then I waited. 3 days passed. On the fourth, I got a text from Whitney. "Hey, Dorothy, can we talk about some updates we're planning? We've been thinking a lot about the new year and want to make sure we're aligned moving forward. Coffee soon?" I stared at the message. There it was. The language of civility disguising conquest. I replied, "Of course. Let me know when." We met on Friday at a trendy little cafe that served lattes in bowls and only played vinyl jazz. She wore a cashmere shawl as if preparing for court and ordered a turmeric tea. "Dorothy," she said, smiling too wide. "I think, we've been in a bit of transition lately." I sipped my coffee. Didn't nod. Didn't frown. Just watched. She continued. "Mark and I have been talking, and we feel that maybe the current setup isn't sustainable anymore. It's not about you. It's about space, growth, autonomy." I said nothing. She glanced down at her notebook. "We were thinking it might be a good time for you to explore independent living communities. There are some lovely ones just outside the city. Peaceful, safe. You deserve that." I placed my cup down gently. "Are you evicting me?" Her eyes widened. "No, no, Dorothy. That's such a harsh word. We're simply evolving the household." I smiled then, not broadly, not warmly, just enough to let her know I'd been waiting. "Whitney," I said, reaching into my handbag. "You should probably read this." I laid the document on the table, its heading crisp and unbending. "Title Deed Halbrook Residence." Her face paled. She reached forward, scanning until she hit paragraph 7. She went still. "No," she whispered. "Yes," I said. She reread the line aloud. "The party of residents Dorothy Halbrook retains full and uninterrupted rights to occupy the garden suite for the duration of her natural life." There was no confusion, no loophole, no out. Whitney leaned back in her seat, the turmeric tea forgotten. "I see," she said, her voice nearly cracking. "I'm not leaving," I said, standing. "But I do appreciate the coffee." After that coffee meeting, Whitney didn't speak to me for 3 days. I expected silence. In fact, I welcomed it. Silence was a space I knew well better than she ever could. Silence raised children. Silence buried husbands. Silence memorized which switches buzzed and which steps creaked. Silence was where women like me learned to endure. But silence from Whitney wasn't absence, it was strategy. By day 4, the signs were everywhere. The garbage pickup I'd scheduled was mysteriously canceled. The Wi-Fi password changed. Liam's after-school hugs became distant waves. The shared laundry schedule disappeared from the fridge. My clean towel started smelling faintly of bleach. Then came the envelope. It wasn't hand-delivered. Whitney didn't have the spine for that. It arrived via courier addressed to Miss Dorothy Halbrook. Not even Mom. Inside was a proposal. Relocation assistance. A stipend. A list of nearby retirement villages, contact numbers, glossy brochures with smiling seniors doing Tai Chi. It looked like a honeymoon package for the forgotten. There was a post-it note in her handwriting. "We really think this could be a beautiful new chapter." I placed the envelope in my kitchen drawer beside the spare batteries and unopened peppermints. And then I picked up my phone. It was time. The lawyer I called wasn't flashy. He was young, quiet, and handled elder housing and estate protection. I liked him immediately. He read the deed in full. "They can't force you out," he said plainly. "You have occupancy rights. But if they attempt to manipulate, harass, or coerce you into leaving, it's actionable." I nodded. "Can we send something quietly? Something she'll understand?" He smiled. "We can." By Friday, Whitney received a letter from his office. It was polite, sharp. Not threatening, just clear. It cited statutes. It included copies of the original documents. It reminded her that undue pressure on a senior homeowner to vacate protected property was not only unethical, it could be considered elder abuse under certain circumstances. No response for 2 days. Then she knocked on my door. Whitney never came to the garden suite. That was the whole point, it was my space. A polite line between her curated world and my simple, quiet one. But now she stood at my door, her lip trembling. No makeup, eyes ringed with exhaustion. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. She paced. I didn't mean to upset you, she began, tone rehearsed. Things have just been hard. You know how the holidays are. We've had a lot of stress, Mark's work, Liam's school, just life. I waited. I might have said some things. I shouldn't have. She continued. And maybe I wasn't thinking clearly at dinner. I kept waiting. I want to move forward peacefully, she said finally. For Liam's sake. And for Mark. I nodded slowly. Then I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out a small square envelope. It wasn't legal. It was emotional. Photos. Old ones. Whitney in her early 20s, the first time she came to our house for Christmas. Liam's first birthday, her hand guiding his into the cake. Henry and her dancing in the backyard under string lights. I handed her the envelope. She looked down at the photos. Her lip quivered again. I loved you, I said quietly. I still do, but I will not be erased. I'm not your problem. I'm your history. For once, she didn't argue. She left without another word. That night, Mark knocked. He stood there, unsure, like a boy again. His voice was low. She's not handling it well, he said. I can imagine. I didn't mean for it to get like this. I thought when you gave us the house, I thought you wanted distance. I wanted you to have stability, I said. And I wanted to be nearby for Liam. He looked down. I've been a coward. I touched his arm. You've been a husband trying to keep the peace, but now you're a father. And your son is watching how you treat your mother. He nodded. We didn't hug, not then. But the next morning, a small plate of warm rolls sat outside my door. No note. Just steam rising from rosemary. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. The new year crept forward. Days got longer, but inside the house the air felt heavier. Not loud, just heavier, like everyone was holding their breath. Whitney stopped making snide comments in passing. She didn't mention space or boundaries, but she also didn't talk to me much at all. Mark tried. He brought me coffee some mornings. He'd knock once, step inside, place the cup on the counter, and mumble something about Liam's homework or a recipe he remembered from childhood. It was effort, but it was also guilt. He didn't know how to undo years of silence with a cinnamon latte. Liam remained my sunbeam. Innocent, unaware. He still came into the garden suite after school to show me drawings or steal a cookie. That week he made a picture of Grandma Dot's house. He drew my little suite, the garden with the broken gnome, the lemon tree, and me, standing outside, holding a plate of muffins. He didn't draw Whitney. One afternoon I overheard a phone call. Not intentionally, just through the thin vent between the suite and the main kitchen. Whitney was whispering, I can't believe she's still here. It's like living with a ghost. Mark said nothing for a beat. Then softly, she's Liam's grandmother. A pause. I know, but it's suffocating. We can't even plan anything. She's always watching. I stepped away from the vent. I'd heard enough, not because it hurt, though it did, but because it confirmed the truth. Whitney hadn't changed. The apology had been performance. The silence was not remorse. It was recalibration. She was waiting to strike differently. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged into Facebook. My account was dusty photos of Henry's retirement party, blurry garden shots. A few old poems I posted back when I thought people still read those things. But I needed to see something. I typed Whitney's name into the search bar, and there it was. A private post from New Year's Day. I wasn't tagged, but someone in her friend circle had commented on it, and I could see the preview. It read, "Some people drain the room just by existing. Just because they're old doesn't mean they're owed your life." The comments were all hearts and fire emojis. Underneath, someone had written, "Good for you, Queen. Set those boundaries." I clicked. The full post had photos. One was me blurred in the background, sitting on that awful folding chair. The caption, "Toxic energy doesn't need to shout. It just leeches." I didn't cry. I didn't call her. I didn't even reply. But I saved the post. And then I did something else. I opened a folder I hadn't touched in a while. Inside were notes, letters, old voicemails. Records of every time I'd offered help, watched Liam overnight, brought groceries when they were tight. Copies of receipts. A note Whitney once wrote me thanking me for being the only mother figure she ever had. I made a compilation. A quiet little file labeled history. And I sent it. Not to the lawyer. Not to Mark. I sent it to Elaine. Elaine called that night. She didn't start with hello. She posted that about you. Yes. And the photos. Yes. Mom, this isn't just mean, it's pathological. I didn't respond. I'm calling Mark, she said. This has to stop. No, I replied. Let it sit. Why? Because it's not about exposing her. It's about letting her feel seen and knowing she can't hide anymore. Elaine exhaled. You scare me sometimes. I scare myself, I admitted. 3 days later, Mark knocked again. He looked paler, older. He came inside without asking, sat down and placed his phone on the table. He'd seen the post. I didn't know she posted that, he said. I'm sorry. I know. I don't know what to do. Then don't do anything. Not yet. He looked at me. Why are you being so calm? I leaned forward. Because I spent most of my life shrinking to make other people comfortable. And I'm done with that now. He didn't respond. But he didn't leave either. That weekend, I planned something. A dinner. Not a grand affair, just a table for 6. Elaine, Liam, a few old friends, Mark if he chose to come, and Whitney. Well, she'd have to decide whether to face the truth or stay in the fantasy. Either way, she wouldn't be able to control the room. Not this time. I took my time setting the table. Nothing fancy, just white plates, cloth napkins, a small glass bowl of daffodils in the center. The good silverware, the ones Henry bought me the year Mark was born. I used them for every birthday, every holiday. They still held the scratches of decades. I cooked too. Not out of obligation, but intention. A garlic rosemary roast, herbed potatoes, buttered green beans with lemon zest. I even made the sour cherry cobbler. I invited Elaine first, of course. She offered to help, but I told her I wanted to do it alone. Then I asked Liam. His face lit up like the moon. Mark, I texted the morning of. No pressure. Just an address, a time, and one sentence. There's a seat for you. I didn't invite Whitney. Not explicitly. But I didn't say she couldn't come either. They arrived just after 6. Elaine brought a bottle of red and a nervous smile. Liam skipped through the garden, racing around the lemon tree before slipping in through the side gate. Mark came last. Alone. He stood at the edge of the patio looking in through the French doors like he wasn't sure if he belonged. I opened the door for him and smiled. Come in. He didn't ask about Whitney. Neither did I. We sat. We ate. The food was warm. The room warmer. We talked about nothing. How tall Liam had gotten. How the garden needed replanting, the new bakery Elaine found near her office. It felt like breathing again. But it wasn't until dessert that the mood shifted. I stood up, went to the cabinet, and pulled out the old projector. The one Henry used for slideshows in the 90s. I plugged it in. Clicked. On the wall appeared the first image. Whitney at 26 standing in my kitchen stirring soup with a wooden spoon. Liam, a baby, giggling in her arms. Next slide, Mark and Whitney in the backyard holding hands as I handed them the keys to the house. Elaine leaned forward. Slide after slide, I showed our history. Birthday parties. Garden picnics. Thank you notes Whitney once wrote. Snapshots of texts. Can you grab groceries? Thank you for watching, Liam. You're a lifesaver, Dorothy. Then, a final slide. The Facebook post. Silence fell. Mark's face turned pale. Liam looked confused. Elaine inhaled sharply. I turned off the projector. No words. Just the image of what had been, and what had been done. Why? Mark asked softly. I sat down again. Not to shame her. To remind you all of the truth. Elaine reached over and touched my hand. Mark looked away. Then, she asked if she could come tonight. My heart paused. I told her not yet, he said. She's not ready. I nodded. Liam piped up suddenly. Grandma, what's a parasite? The room went still. Elaine started to interject, but I raised my hand. I looked at my grandson, his eyes wide and waiting. A parasite, I said gently, is something that takes and never gives back. He frowned. But you gave me cookies. I smiled. And stories. And garden strawberries. He nodded solemnly. Then you're not one. Mark rubbed his temples. I don't know who I married anymore. He muttered. You know, I said. But you've tried not to. That hurt him. I saw it. But I also saw the recognition behind his eyes. The dinner ended quietly. No big emotions. Just full stomachs and full silence. Elaine hugged me tightly. Liam fell asleep on the couch. Mark helped me with the dishes without being asked. As he dried the last pan, he said, "I want things to change." "Then they can," I answered. He nodded once and left without another word. Later that night, I sat alone. The daffodils on the table had begun to wilt. The candles burned low, and for the first time in weeks, I felt peace. Not because everything was fixed, but because the lie had been exposed, and the truth was finally louder than the silence. The next morning was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No thudding music from the main house. No clinking of Whitney's aggressively cheerful spoon against her smoothie glass. No sharp heels tapping on hardwood. Just birdsong, a slight breeze. The kind of stillness you don't trust yet, like a child who's suddenly too quiet in the next room. I sat with my tea rereading the note Elaine had slipped me the night before. Just 5 words. "She's unraveling. Hold your line." It wasn't dramatic. Just factual. Elaine saw what I'd seen. Whitney wasn't just angry. She was cornered. And people who feel trapped don't surrender. They lash out. I thought it might take a week. It took 2 hours. At precisely 10:07 a.m., there was a bang at the garden gate. I opened it to find Whitney standing there in workout clothes and rage. She didn't ask to come in. She pushed past me straight into the suite, planting herself in the middle of my rug. "What the hell was that?" she snapped. "Good morning to you too." Her nostrils flared. "Do you think humiliating me in front of my family is going to make you look like the victim? I didn't say a word last night, but you showed them. The photos. The post. You've been digging, haven't you? You've been waiting for me to slip." I stared at her hands calmly folded in front of me. "Whitney," I said slowly, "you didn't slip. You leapt." She took a shaky breath. "You've poisoned Mark against me." "No," I said. "You did that when you stopped treating his mother like a human being." She started pacing. "You don't know how hard it's been living with you in our space. Always judging me. Always here." "That's because it's not your space," I said, voice still calm. "It's ours. And that's sweet. That's mine. Legally. Emotionally. Historically. You're not even nice to me." "I used to be," I said, "until nice became invisible." She spun around. "You think you're so clever. But this little power play, it's not going to fix anything." "I'm not trying to fix anything," I said. "I'm trying to stop the bleeding." Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked at the photo of Henry on my bookshelf, the only place in this house where his face still lived. Then she laughed bitterly. "You know what? Keep it. Keep the sweet. Keep the moral high ground. Just don't expect Mark to forgive you when this all falls apart." She stormed out, slamming the gate behind her. I waited for the trembling to start. It didn't. Instead, I made myself another cup of tea. Then I started baking muffins. Liam would be hungry after school. 2 days passed. Then came the call. It wasn't Mark. It was Whitney's mother. "Dorothy," she said, her voice tired. "I just heard everything." I blinked. "From who?" "Whitney. She's crying. Says she's been villainized, backed into a corner. Says you're turning everyone against her." "And what do you think?" There was a pause. "I think she's been spoiled," her mother said. "And I think she's terrified of being irrelevant." I sat with that for a moment. "She married a man who loves his mother," I said. "She's treated that as a threat." "She's always been competitive," her mother whispered. "Even with me." That hung in the air between us. Then she said something I didn't expect. "She needs consequences." I stayed quiet. "If you're building a boundary," she said, "I support it. Don't soften." Not this time. It was strange how the smallest moments held the most power. Like a woman I barely knew giving me permission to do what I already knew was right. That night, I got a text from Mark. "She's staying with her mom for a few days." It wasn't an update. It was a question, asking if I would reach out, if I would mend things. I didn't reply. Because this wasn't about reconciliation. It was about reflection, and she hadn't done that yet. Mark didn't come down for 3 days. Normally, he'd find an excuse, ask if I needed anything from the store, bring Liam to say hello, even just knock to mention the weather. But after Whitney left, his silence deepened. Not the passive silence of avoidance. This was the silence of a man staring at a mirror that finally showed him who he'd been all along. Elaine checked in daily. Liam came over twice, each time quieter. He sensed the tension, though. He didn't know its shape. Kids always do. They see what adults hide. On Thursday afternoon, I opened the door to find Liam waiting with his sketchbook. "Can I draw in here?" he asked. "Always." He sat on the floor, legs crossed, crayons scattered around him. I brewed tea and sliced apple for him, and for a while the sweet felt normal again. Then he asked, "Did Mommy run away?" I knelt beside him. "No, sweet pea. She's just taking space." He chewed his lip. "Did you make her mad?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I handed him a crayon. "Draw me what peace looks like," I said. He frowned. "I don't know how." "Try anyway." And he did. It looked like a house with a son and a grandma holding a pie. No mom. No dad. Just me. The next morning, Mark knocked. He didn't wait for an answer. He stepped in and sat down, more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. "She wants to come home." I nodded, waiting. But not like before, he added. "She wants ground rules." "Whose?" He looked up. "Hers. She wants to set terms. Where you can go. When you can visit. Whether or not you use the laundry room." I didn't flinch. "She says if we're going to live together, she needs to feel safe." Safe. The irony curled in my throat. She's framing me as the threat. He hesitated. "She says the house doesn't feel like hers anymore." I sighed. "Maybe it never did." He shook his head. She's not all bad." "I know," I said. "But being not all bad doesn't make someone good." He looked pained. "I want peace, Mom." "So do I." "But you won't give in." "No," I said, "because peace built on erasure is just quiet suffering." He rubbed his face. "Do you want her back?" I asked. "I don't know." That was honest. And honesty had been scarce between us. "I think she needs to live in truth," I said. "And I think she doesn't like the version she sees when truth enters the room." He didn't speak after that. He just stood, kissed my forehead, and left. That weekend, I got a call from Liam's teacher. Nothing alarming, just a check-in. "He drew something concerning," she said. "A picture of two houses. A sad mommy with a line through her face. Words scrawled underneath. 'You can't erase Grandma.'" I stared at the table. "I'll talk to him," I promised. But I didn't, because he wasn't wrong. He had witnessed the truth, and his little hands were brave enough to say it. On Sunday, Whitney returned. She didn't knock. She moved like a shadow, slipping through the front door past the kitchen and into the hallway. I heard her. I always do. She walked past the suite, paused, then kept going. That night, Mark came back down. "She's home." "I know. She wants to talk." "I don't." He looked stricken. "Mom, I'll listen when she's ready to apologize. Not perform, not reframe, but genuinely apologize. And if she doesn't, then she can live upstairs in discomfort. Because I'm done living in silence." Monday morning came with fog. It wrapped the house like gauze, muffling every sound. Even the birds kept quiet, as if they too sensed the weight that had settled in the rooms above. I made oatmeal, sweet with a dash of nutmeg and brown sugar, Henry's favorite. It was my armor. I believed in feeding pain, softening it with warmth. A quiet meal could soothe more than sermons. I sat at the small table beside the window, the one facing the lemon tree, when I heard footsteps above. Not Mark's. His were heavy, tired. These were precise, measured. Whitney's. She was awake early. That meant something, but I didn't move. I just stirred my oatmeal and let the fog blur the glass. Then came the soft knock. It wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic. It was uncertain. I opened the door. Whitney stood there, hair pulled back, a cardigan wrapped tight around her shoulders like armor. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She didn't sit. She stood in the center of the room, hands twisting together like rope. "I owe you more than an apology," she began. I said nothing. "I've been awful. I know that now. And I think maybe I always was. But people let me get away with it because I made things look nice. Because I smiled and organized things and kept everything curated. I still said nothing. But that dinner, the pictures, the post. I didn't realize how much hate I was holding until I saw myself through your eyes." She finally looked at me, and it terrified me. I gestured to the chair. She sat, her body curling inward like she wanted to vanish. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. "But I wanted you to know I see it now. What I did. How I made you feel small. How I used silence as a weapon. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I wanted control, because I felt out of control. And instead of dealing with that, I tried to push you out like you were clutter in my house. She took a breath. You're not clutter. She looked down. You're the roots. That was when my hands started shaking. Not from anger, from relief. Because for the first time I believed her. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is from me, she said. No lawyers. No tricks. It's just my promise. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, pages long. I didn't read it yet. I wanted to wait, to honor the effort it took to write. But I saw the first line. I remember the first time you hugged me and I didn't flinch. She stood to leave. I'll stay out of the suite. You can take your space. I won't make rules anymore. I'll make amends. She reached for the door. Whitney, I said softly. She turned. You're still Liam's mother. Don't forget that. He's watching us both. She nodded. I won't. Then she left. I didn't cry. Not then. I placed the letter beside Henry's photo, poured myself another cup of tea, and sat by the window again. The fog had lifted. That afternoon, Liam came bounding into the suite like a spark. Mommy said I could sleep in your room next weekend. He cheered. Oh, did she now? Yeah. She said your bed is magic and it makes people tell the truth. I smiled. It just helps you sleep. Same thing he said. We made cookies. We drew trees. We listened to jazz on the record player until dusk. When he left, I pulled out the letter, and I read every word. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't poetry, but it was sincere. And for now, that was enough. The days that followed felt strange, like I had stepped into a different version of my life, one where nothing had changed, yet everything had shifted just slightly out of alignment. Whitney didn't avoid me anymore. But she didn't hover either. We were polite, careful. Two women walking a narrow bridge between guilt and grace, neither sure how stable the wood beneath us really was. She started leaving little things. Not notes, she wasn't that sentimental. But I'd find fresh towels folded in the hallway. A jar of lemon curd on my doorstep with no explanation. She even refilled the bird feeder in my window. It wasn't a peace treaty. It was breadcrumb reconciliation. And I followed them one by one. Mark began talking again. Not about Whitney. About himself. He came down one morning with a photo album I hadn't seen in years. Do you remember this? He asked, pointing to a picture of him dressed as a tomato for a school play. I laughed. You were the only tomato with stage fright. He chuckled. I only remember you being backstage. With snacks. That was my job. No, he said. Your job was to be the one who showed up. And you never missed. He looked at me then, and I saw it. The guilt. The recognition. The boy he had been. And the man he'd let himself become. I should have defended you, he said. At that dinner. At every dinner. It's not too late, I told him. He nodded slowly. I want to try. And then he reached over and held my hand. The last time he'd done that was the day of Henry's funeral. I didn't let go. Elaine came by later that week, half expecting an update, half expecting a war report. When I told her what had happened with Whitney, she raised an eyebrow. And you believe her? I believe she's trying. Elaine didn't look convinced. She made you feel like trash, Mom. I know. And Liam still sees it. You think he didn't hear the fights? He saw how we handled the aftermath, I said. That matters more. Elaine sipped her coffee, staring into the cup like it held answers. You're softer than I am, she said. No, I smiled. I'm just older. I've learned where to place my sharpness. She laughed, and I caught the flash of the girl she used to be, the one who scraped her knees but never cried until we got home. We sat in silence after that. Not the heavy kind. The good kind. The kind only shared between mothers and daughters who've seen each other whole. Liam brought a school project to me that weekend. Family tree, he said. But I want it to look real, like with feelings. So we did. We drew roots under each name, little scribbles that represented traits. Elaine had fire. Mark had calm. Whitney had storm. When he got to me, he paused. Then wrote, soil. She holds us all. I stared at that word for a long time after he left. Sunday came with a strange invitation. Whitney left a note on my counter, just one line. Dinner. Just us. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I got dressed. The dining room looked the same, but she had moved my chair. No longer the folding seat at the end. This time it sat beside hers. She made lamb. It was dry. Too much time. But I ate every bite. We didn't talk about the Facebook post, or the letter, or the lawsuit that never was. We talked about Liam's drawings, Mark's terrible taste in podcasts, my garden plans for spring. Halfway through dessert, she asked, "What do you want from me?" I set my fork down. Respect, honesty, and space when I ask for it. She nodded, then added, "And what do you not want?" Control, performance, or pity. Another nod. Then softly, "I can do that." Afterward, as I left, she walked me to the door. "Thank you," she said. I paused. "For what?" "For staying." I didn't answer right away. Then said, "I stayed because I knew one day you'd see it." "See what?" "That you weren't replacing me. You were joining me." She didn't reply, but she hugged me. The kind that lingers. The kind that means something's healing. I didn't trust it right away. The calm. The way Whitney had started softening her edges, inviting me to dinner, letting me exist in rooms where once I was invisible. I'd lived too long, seen too many performance apologies to believe in instant transformation. But the change was steady. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. One morning, she invited me to help pick paint colors for the guest bathroom. "I want your eye," she said. "You always knew what made a room feel like home." I almost laughed. Coming from her, the woman who once banned doilies and laced that sentence meant something. We chose sea glass blue, soft, not too cold. The same color Henry once painted our porch swing. I didn't mention that. Some memories are better held close. Then came the real test. She invited me to speak at Liam's school. Grandparent Day. I was shocked she even remembered it was coming. "They're doing oral histories," she explained. "The kids are asking where we come from." At first I hesitated. Public speaking was never my thing, but Liam begged, eyes wide, hands clasped in mock prayer. So I said yes. I wore my navy sweater with the little embroidered lilies. Whitney drove me dressed in soft gray, no heels, no makeup, just her real face. We didn't talk much on the way, but before we got out of the car, she said, "You'll be amazing." And for the first time, I believed she meant it. The classroom was full of tiny chairs and construction paper. Each child brought something: pictures, recipes, maps. Liam had drawn our house, both the main one and the garden suite. He pointed to the suite. "That's where Grandma Dot lives. She has magic tea." The room laughed. I stood up, hands slightly shaking, and I told them about Henry, how he worked with his hands, how he whistled when he baked bread, how we built the garden suite not as a backup plan but a legacy. I told them about hard winters, about joy that came in small bursts like sunlight on cracked tile. And I ended with this: you don't need a mansion or a title to have a rich life. You just need roots, and the courage to grow again when someone tries to cut you down. There was silence. Then applause. Tiny, high-pitched applause from children who didn't fully understand what I said, but felt it anyway. Afterward, Whitney hugged me in front of everyone. She didn't flinch. That night, I placed Liam's drawing in my scrapbook. The one I hadn't opened in years. I slipped it behind the photo of Mark as a boy standing beside Henry in the garden, both of them covered in tomato juice and pride. We were becoming something again. Not perfect, but possible. A week later, I got a letter. Not from Whitney. From her mother. A simple card. "Thank you," it read, "for showing my daughter how to be a better one." Inside was a recipe card. Her mother's peach tart. "I thought it belonged in your kitchen now." I placed it behind my salt tin, right next to Henry's lemon bar instructions. The next morning, Liam burst into the suite carrying a box. "What's this?" I asked. "Mom says it's your birthday present early, but it's not until next month. She said you deserve it now." I opened it. Inside was a hand-bound journal, leather cover, my name etched in gold foil. On the first page, "For the roots of this family." I ran my fingers over the page. Whitney may never erase what she did, but she was building something new, and brick by brick I was starting to believe in it. March came with rain, steady, insistent rain that tapped on the garden suite windows and turned the soil to velvet. My lemon tree thrived. So did the weeds, but I let them stay a while. Some things need to grow wild before you can pull them gently. Liam helped me plant sweet peas along the back fence. His hands were too small for the trowel, but his heart was big enough for the dirt. Every time he buried a seed, he whispered, "Grow big." He didn't know he was talking to more than plants. Whitney came down that afternoon with tea. She didn't ask to be let in. She knocked and waited, then stepped inside, holding 2 mugs and a small plate of oatmeal cookies. "I didn't bake," she said, "but I stirred the batter." It was her way of saying, "I tried." We sat in silence watching Liam run circles around the tree pretending it was a castle turret. Whitney sipped her tea, then asked, "Do you remember the first time I came to this house?" I nodded. "You wore purple heels and had a laugh like a wind chime." She smiled faintly. "I was so nervous. I wanted to impress you." "You did," I said. "I just didn't know how much I'd pay for it later." She flinched. "I deserve that." "No," I said gently. "You earned it." "That's different." We watched Liam dig a tiny moat. Whitney leaned back, her shoulders less tense than I remembered. "I used to think love was about loyalty," she said. "Now I think it's about accountability." I looked at her. "That's a start." Later that evening, Mark came down with a folder. "I've been thinking," he said, "about the house. About what happens when... later." He didn't say when you're gone. He said later. That small mercy mattered. "I talked to a lawyer," he continued. "I want to make sure the suite always stays in the family, but not as a burden. As a legacy." He handed me the papers. "Your name stays on it. Always." I nodded, holding back the tide behind my eyes. "Thank you." "No," he said. "Thank you for not walking away when we deserved it." That night, Whitney knocked again. "I want to show you something." She led me upstairs for the first time in months. The main hallway smelled like cedar and lemon, not bleach. She opened the door to the spare room. Inside was a reading nook, soft chair, lamp, bookshelf half stocked. "This is for you," she said. "If you ever want to be up here, you don't have to stay downstairs." My throat tightened. "I know it's small," she added, "but it's a space that says, you belong." I stepped inside, took it in. The framed photo on the shelf, me and Henry at our anniversary dinner. The mug beside it read, "Rooted and rising." I turned to her. "Did you do this for me?" "No," she said. "I did it for all of us." Later, Liam climbed into the chair with me. "Is this the grandma chair now?" I pulled him into my lap. "It's whatever we make it." He nodded, then whispered, "You're not a parasite." I smiled, my heart catching. "I know, sweet pea. But Mommy said it once." I heard. I paused. "And what did she say after?" He grinned. "She said she was wrong." I hugged him tighter than ever. Sometimes healing comes in whispers. In soil under your nails. In a child's truth. In a chair upstairs that didn't used to exist. And suddenly what was broken isn't whole. But it's yours again. It was April when the knock came at dusk. Not Whitney. Not Mark. Not Liam. Elaine. Holding an envelope, her expression tight. "I wasn't going to show you," she said. But then I thought, no. You deserve to see it. I took the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots. Private messages. A group chat. Not current. Old ones. From that month after Henry died. When I was sleeping in the garden suite alone for the first time. When Whitney had offered to help handle things while I grieved in peace. The group chat included Whitney, 2 of her friends from college, and someone I didn't know. Whitney's name was right there next to the words. "Now that the old woman's alone, we can finally modernize that cave she calls a house. And then, we'll start with her room. Just need Mark on board. Shouldn't take long." Elaine sat down across from me. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "But I found it by accident." She forgot to delete the chat off an old email account we shared in college. I still had the password. I read it again. And again. I was too stunned to cry. The warmth. The reading nook. The apology letter. The soft tea mornings. Was it all manipulation? Or had she truly changed? Elaine leaned forward. "You said you believe people can change. But you also said change needs accountability." I know what I said. "Then what do you want to do?" I looked at the printouts. I could burn them. I could show them to Mark. I could put them on the dinner table and wait for Whitney's eyes to widen. But I didn't. I placed them in the drawer under my garden gloves. Because this wasn't about catching her. It was about watching what she chose next. The next day, Whitney called. "Do you want to go with me to pick up Liam from school?" She never asked that before. I said yes. We walked in silence. Not cold. Just thoughtful. At the school gate, Liam came running. Grandma, guess what? What? I told my teacher you live in a magic house. Oh, yeah. Because every time someone's sad, they go in and come out better. Whitney smiled softly. That's true, she whispered. We walked back together, Liam skipping ahead. At the garden gate, Whitney paused. She turned to me. I know I've done a lot of damage. I waited. I don't expect to erase that. But I hope you know I don't think of this as my house anymore. It's ours, I said. It always was. She looked down. And I'm not the center of it. No, I said. Liam is. She looked up, eyes full but steady. I'm not asking for your trust back all at once, she said, but I'm asking to earn it, day by day. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the gate for her. That was answer enough. That night, I pulled the envelope from the drawer. I placed the printouts in a box, labeled it Old Storms. Then I taped it shut and tucked it in the attic behind the sewing kit and the holiday wreaths. Because even storms deserve a place to rest. May arrived in full bloom. The garden exploded with color. Petunias, snapdragons, lilies. Even the lemon tree bore tiny green bulbs, promises of fruit to come. I spent hours outside pruning, watering, whispering encouragement to the ones that struggled. That's the thing about gardening. You start to forgive things more easily. The stubborn weeds, the broken stems, even the flowers that bloomed too late. Inside the house, small shifts had become quiet rituals. Whitney and I made breakfast together once a week. Nothing formal, just eggs and toast, sometimes a pot of early gray. No grand conversations, no deep apologies. Just the quiet music of two women moving around each other without collision. Mark returned to woodworking, building a small shelf for Liam's room. Elaine came by more often, bringing books and puzzles, lingering over coffee. And Liam just kept growing. His hair a little longer, his questions a little deeper. One day he asked me, "Grandma, are you and Mommy friends now?" I smiled, stirring sugar into my tea. "We're learning how to be." He thought about that. "Like school?" "Exactly." He nodded seriously. "Then you'll pass." I kissed the top of his head. "I already have." The garden suite, once my refuge, began to feel less like exile and more like sanctuary. I opened the curtains wider each day. I started baking again, not out of habit, but joy. And one sunny afternoon, Whitney knocked with a small potted plant. "Peace lily," she said. "Thought it might suit your windowsill?" I took it, held it in both hands. It was healthy, rooted, ready, like me. That evening after dinner, Whitney lingered at the table. Mark had gone to bed early. Liam had fallen asleep on the couch, crayon in hand. She looked at me and said, "Do you remember when I said you were a parasite?" I paused, taken aback. She had never brought it up herself. "I do," I replied. "I said it because I thought you were in the way. Like I needed to make space for my version of family." She swallowed hard. "But I was wrong. You weren't in the way. You were the way." I felt something shift inside me. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. It was the original deed. The one Henry and I signed when we built the suite. "I had a copy made," she said. "It's framed now, hanging above the reading nook." I blinked. "I wanted it there, so I don't forget." She added, "Whose shoulders I'm standing on." For the first time in months, I reached across the table and took her hand. It was warm. No tremble, no war, just presence. Later, when the house went quiet, I stood alone in the upstairs hallway. I walked past the reading nook, touched the frame, my name etched in cursive, Henry's signature beside it. I ran my fingers across the glass, then down to the mug still sitting on the table. Rooted and rising. For a moment I closed my eyes and imagined Henry standing behind me, not saying anything, just proud. Whitney found me there. She didn't say anything either, just stood beside me, watching the same name that once made her bristle now fill her with peace. We didn't need to speak, because forgiveness had already spoken for us. June unfolded like a breath held too long, finally released. The house was different now, not louder or busier, but gentler, softer. Even the creaks in the floorboards seemed to sigh with relief. Liam's laughter drifted down hallways like music. Elaine visited without urgency. Mark smiled more often, Not the forced kind, but those easy, fleeting grins that only come when the air feels safe again. Whitney and I found a rhythm. We didn't pretend to be best friends. We didn't rewrite history, but we moved forward. Like dancers who once tripped through every step, now gliding in imperfect grace. One morning, I found Whitney in the garden, hands deep in soil. She'd never gardened before, always claimed she didn't like the dirt under her nails. But there she was, planting marigolds. For the bugs, she said. They protect the tomatoes. I crouched beside her, handing her a trowel. She didn't need it. Her fingers worked slowly, steadily, as if she was planting more than flowers, as if she was burying something too. When we stood, she wiped her hands on her pants, looked at me, and asked, "Do you believe people change?" "I believe people choose to," I said, "and then prove it. Every day." She nodded. "I'm still proving it," she whispered. "I see it," I replied. That was all she needed. A week later, we had our first real gathering since the new year. Not a party, just family. Mark grilled chicken on the patio. Elaine brought lemonade and lemon bars. Liam made place cards from folded construction paper, labeling each seat with a crayon drawing. He placed me and Whitney side by side. When we sat down, he clinked a spoon against his glass. "I want to say something," he said, eyes too big for his little face. "We're a family, and sometimes families fight, but we're like flowers. We grow back. Even if someone steps on us." No one moved. Whitney reached for my hand under the table. This time I didn't hesitate. I held hers, firmly. After dinner, we watched the fireflies. The backyard shimmered like memory. Whitney stood beside me on the porch. "I used to think legacy was what you left behind," she said. "Now I think it's what you keep alive." I nodded, watching Liam chase the light. "Then I think we're doing just fine," she smiled. "Happy early birthday, Dorothy." I laughed. "You remembered." Hard to forget the woman who turned my world upside down and made it better. We didn't speak again that night. Just watched the boy who'd unknowingly stitched our family back together dance in the dark with joy. Later, as I sat in the reading nook upstairs, I opened the journal Whitney had given me. On the last page, she'd written, "Thank you for being the roots, and for waiting while I learned how to bloom." I closed it, ran my hand along the leather, and whispered, "You're welcome." Sometimes the deepest wounds don't leave scars, they leave wisdom. What began with bitterness, a slammed insult at a dinner table, and years of pent-up resentment bloomed slowly, painfully into something worth holding on to. I've lived long enough to know that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's strength layered in understanding and rebuilding trust. That's a choice you make over and over when no one's watching. I won't pretend it was easy. Whitney broke me. Not just with her words, but with her efforts to erase me from a home I helped build. But I stayed. I stayed for Liam, for Mark, for Henry's memory, for the soil beneath my feet that still remembers my touch. And she came back. Not perfectly, not immediately. But honestly, we live side by side now, two women once at war, now tending the same garden. She still makes mistakes. So do I. But we keep showing up. And that, I've learned, is what real family does. So if you've been hurt, forgotten, insulted, don't shrink. Don't disappear. Stand in your truth. Let time show them who you really are. Because sometimes revenge doesn't come in fire. Sometimes it grows in a garden, blooming gently, fiercely, undeniably. And you, my dear listener, are allowed to bloom too.